we have John Horrigan here this evening. Obviously, you all know what this is about because we have a nice full house here. So I'm glad everybody's here. John Horrigan, I learned today, is actually Julie at the front desk's brother. So that was an interesting little coinky-dink. Yes. So that was something I just learned. But I do want to be short-winded due to the fact that this will be a wonderful presentation. I know that John would like to get a lot of stories and feedback from all of you, so he may cut his slides a little bit short so that he can really fill in with stories and such. So let's give John and his hurricane of 1938 a warm welcome.
Thank you, Yvette. It's great to be here in Fox Hill Village in Westwood, Massachusetts. I'm a boy who grew up just across the highway in Dedham, Massachusetts. But I have to start off, before I even begin, I'm a bit disappointed as I come here tonight. As I look out over the audience, I don't see one face that was around in 1938. You're all too young for me. A little bit about me. I'm a New England folklorist. That means that I'm not a degreed historian in terms of having a suffix following my name, a prefix before my name, or a mortgage-sized student loan nipping at my heels for the rest of my life. I'm a weather historian, a historical astronomer, studying historical economics. My focus is on history between the 1920s and the 1950s. I'm also a reenactor, colonial reenactor with the Lincoln Minutemen, marching a lot of parades. And a professional sports announcer with the Boston Bruins alumni. I don't know if I see Mr. Schmidt here tonight. And I worked with the New England Patriots alumni as their basketball announcer. Summered in Green Harbor, Mass. And I've been called a lot of things, some that I can't say in public, but my favorite is, I was called by a newspaper recently, a time traveler driving without a license, or a road nostalgian. Just want to let you know that hold your questions, please, until the end of tonight's presentation. There'll be a lot of text. Don't bother reading it. They'll be able to hear me all the way over to Clark House tonight. Trust me. The expert rule is usually there's somebody who knows more about the subject than I do, and someone who thinks that they know more about the subject than I do. So I think in this case it's the former as opposed to the latter, that I'm going to be enriched by some first-hand experiences. We're going to look at the hurricane snapshot of GH38 tonight. We'll briefly go over what is a hurricane. We'll take a quick history of North Atlantic hurricanes and the three great hurricanes in history of New England, namely the Great Colonial Hurricane and the Great September Gale of 1815. And then we'll follow the track of the hurricane and look at some factoids. We'll go back to the summer of 1938. We'll look at the muffed forecast, a record low air pressure. And then we'll track the storm as it comes in through New York City, Long Island, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and then we'll follow it right up until through Massachusetts until it goes up into Canada and perishes. When we look at this hurricane, we look at acts of bravery and acts of cowardice, acts of kindness and acts of selfishness. You see providence, luck, and cruel fate. Up until that time, this was the most costly disaster in United States history. It's a lateral buzzsaw. Nobody was prepared because nobody was warned. There are unlikely heroes, and by the time that this hurricane died out on September 28, 1938, 10 states and 2 countries were affected. I'm not going to bog you down with hurricane ratings, but you hear Category 1, Category 2, Category 3, Category 4, Category 5. Basically, a Category 1 has wind speeds sustained from 74 to 95 miles per hour, whereas a monster storm, a Category 5, has sustained wind speeds in excess of 155 miles per hour. Now, you have tropical depressions, which have wind speeds between 23 and 39 miles per hour. We've gone through so many nor'easters in the last couple of years, we're so used to that. And tropical storms have winds that go from 40 to 73 miles per hour. When you talk about the last major hurricane, I'm using quotation fingers, you talk about Hurricane Bob, which struck in 1991 and decimated the mouth of the Cape Cod Canal, mainly the communities of Wareham, Marion, and the storm surge was horrific. But let me tell you something, compared to the Great Hurricane of 1938, Hurricane Bob was nothing more than a sneeze. Not going to go over this, but the 3 factors of hurricane damage. 90% of all hurricane-related deaths and injuries are attributed to storm surge, which is a dome of water 40 to 60 miles long that moves onto the shoreline near the landfall point of the eye. I'm going to give you an eyewitness account of the storm surge as it hits southern Massachusetts. In fact, storm surge killed 200,000 people in one hurricane, a cyclone in India in 1876, and another 300,000 in Haiphong, China in 1881. Of course, you can have wind damage. Wind can quickly decimate tree populations, as it did in the hurricane in 1938, and knock down power lines and utility poles, compounding the misery when people lose their electricity. And of course, rainfall and flooding, sometimes tornadoes will spawn near the eye wall, and torrential rains can normally accompany a hurricane and cause serious flooding. Now, if you look at the vulnerable American coast, this graphic here, and I'll use this laser, I don't know if you can see it, it's a weak red light, but if you look at it, most of the American population on the East Coast goes from Boston down to Washington and Philadelphia area. And then, of course, the Miami, the Floridian coastline. So we are vulnerable to storms that come off of the Atlantic and also to storm surge. One of my favorite slides, this shows you 100 years of hurricanes that have struck the United States from the years 1886 through 1996. And as you can see, all the hurricanes are born off the west coast of Africa, okay, and they move in a northwest or northwest direction. Some will cut over to the Gulf of Mexico, which has been the trend of the last few years. Some will swing right up the coast and strike the Cape Hatteras and the Carolinas, and others will just drift out to sea, and then our friends in England and the United Kingdom get them. One thing I want to point out is the poor folks in Halifax, Nova Scotia, they're vulnerable to hurricanes. Hurricanes may miss us by 100 miles, but they're not out of the woods there. One of the great things is geologists can check out sedimentary deposits over the past 100 or 1,000 years, and an analysis of sedimentary deposits reveal that major hurricane strikes along the New England coast took place in the years 1100 to 1150, pre-Columbus between the years 1300 and 1400, also one hit between 1400 and 1450, and then we have 1635, the Great Colonial Hurricane, 1815, the Great September Gale, and 1869. I've added this one recently. I call it Saxby's Gale. But Columbus, talk about picking the wrong time of the year to come across the Atlantic in September and October of 14 and 92, but he picked a great year because it was very dormant that season. Great Colonial Hurricane took place on August 16, 1635, Old Style calendar, Julian calendar. When you hear Old Style and New Style, basically when they brought the Julian calendar forward, Pope Gregory, he removed the date September 3rd through September 12th, 1752. So if you ever hear those dates spoken, it's not true because they don't exist in modern history. But Governor John Winthrop of Boston said, quote, "This hurricane blew with such violence, with abundance of rain, that it blew down many hundreds of trees, overthrew some houses, and drove ships from their anchors. The tide rose at Narragansett 14 feet higher than ordinary and drowned 8 Indians flying from their wigwams. Also, the ship the Angel Gabriel was destroyed on Cape Ann and lost all 21 hands." We know that the eye of the hurricane passed to the south and east of Boston, and in Plymouth, William Bradford said, quote, "It caused the sea to swell to the south wind of this place above 20 foot right up and down, and made many of the Indians climb into trees for their safety." He's talking about storm surge, a wall of water. "It continued above 5 or 6 hours, but the violence began to abate. It blew down many hundreds of thousands of trees. The signs and marks of it will remain this 100 years in these parts." And of course, he attributes it to a lunar eclipse that happens the next night. But he's very astute. Here in 1635, William Bradford, the Pilgrims have only been here for about 25 years, and he's saying the damage from this hurricane will be here for the next century, and he was right. The Great September Gale of 1815, it's post-Revolutionary War, just at the tail end of the War of 1812. And it struck on Saturday, September 23rd, 1815.